On Ronald Reagan's birthday, YouTube featured a number of tributes to the man. One of these was Ronald Reagan American Heroes, posted by John J. 2427. I posted a comment on this video that my subscribers will know was deleted and I was blocked. I wondered what it was about my comment that struck such a nerve and required removal when other dissenting opinions were allowed to remain. As far as I can tell, it was my use of the word treason to describe Reagan's action in the IranContra scandal. The word treason has been rejected in this case by the language of empire. The language of empire is what we're saturated with daily by the corporate media. The language of empire is what turns kidnapping into extrajudicial rendition, lies and deception into intelligence failures, and torture into enhanced interrogation. With the help of some of my subscribers and a small comment campaign, we finally got John J. to stop deleting comments, and using my alternate channel, I was actually able to engage him a bit on the subject. When user Vash1286 questioned him about Reagan's treason, John J. replied, "Investigations concluded that arms sales were at most a failed and perhaps mistaken policy. People who call it treason," he continued, "are like those who call Obama a traitor for passing legislation they don't like." There's your language of empire at work for you. If it were treason, you would have to prosecute him for it. But if you call it a failed and mistaken policy, perhaps he can be forgiven. But changing the language doesn't make it less treasonous, and passing a new law, however unpopular, hardly compares to breaking an existing law, like selling weapons to an enemy, when there is a congressionally mandated arms embargo. Reagan, however, was doing the bidding of the corporate empire, and they didn't want him prosecuted. Adjust the language a bit, throw a few lower levels to the investigators, and he was able to keep on doing their bidding. When I pointed this out, John Jay's response was to call me arrogant and recommend I research the issue more, insinuating that I don't know what I'm talking about. This too is part of the language of empire. If he can dismiss me as arrogant and uneducated, he can dismiss my comment without ever addressing the points I raised. He did this to others in the comments section as well. John Jay can be forgiven for behaving this way. Every day we're saturated by the media with exactly this kind of non-argument. Too often it passes as real commentary. We can't help but be influenced by the doublespeak we hear glaring out at us from every form of media. For anyone interested in learning further about Reagan's adventures, I recommend the works of Robert Parry, the investigative journalist who first broke the news. He runs a weekly news magazine called ConsortiumNews, and he's published several books on the subject. In closing, I'd like to read for you a couple of paragraphs from an op-ed by Chris Hedges that recently appeared in Truth Out, entitled "Recognizing the Language of Tyranny." Empires communicate in two languages. One language is expressed in imperatives. It is the language of command and force. This militarized language disdains human life and celebrates hypermasculinity. It demands. It makes no attempt to justify the flagrant theft of natural resources and wealth or the use of indiscriminate violence. When families are gunned down at a checkpoint in Iraq, they're often referred to as having been lit up. So it goes, the other language of empire is softer. It employs the vocabulary of ideals and lofty goals, and insists that the power of empire is noble and benevolent. The language of beneficence is used to speak to those outside the centers of death and pillage, those who have not yet been totally broken, those who still must be seduced to hand over power to the predators. The road traveled to total disempowerment, however, ends at the same place. It's the language used to get there that is different. All centralized power, once restraints and regulations are abolished, once it is no longer accountable to citizens, knows no limit to internal and external plunder. The corporate state, which has emasculated our government, is creating a new form of feudalism, a world of masters and serfs. It speaks to those who remain in a state of self-delusion in the comforting and familiar language of liberty, freedom, prosperity, and electoral democracy. It speaks to the poor and the oppressed in the language of naked coercion. But here, too, all will end up in the same place.